Hello, folks. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Mike Talley. I'm the Vice President for Virtual Care and Clinical Improvement in the CHRISTUS Health System Office. I have the wonderful pleasure of interviewing two of our esteemed colleagues in commemoration of Hispanic Heritage Month. Today, we will be speaking with Maricela Moore, our CHRISTUS Health Board of Directors Chairwoman, as well as a State of Texas District Court Judge. Also, we have Jesus Rios, Language Access Services Coordinator at our CHRISTUS St. Vincent Regional Medical Center. To our panelists today, I'd just like to say hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are y'all?
Doing well. Thanks for having us.
Doing great.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us and committing your time. I've got a couple questions that I want to run through with you here. The first of which, I'll let the lady go first, of course, Judge Moore. What persons or events or experiences have shaped how you define Hispanic or Latinx and or your own identity?
So it's kind of a complicated question. It's hard to say pretty quickly, but I think that as a professional, I've never thought of myself as a Hispanic professional or something in that regard. I think it's more of an organic development of my identity based on the experiences that I have and those that have influenced me in my life. And in particular, I think probably the person that has been the most influential, sometimes it sounds cliche, but it is the truth, is my mom. I was raised by a wonderful woman from San Antonio. She was born at CHRISTUS Santa Rosa before it was called that. Our family has very deep roots in San Antonio. She is still an amazing professional. You know, the Latina in her was never communicated to me as something separate from who she is or who I am, but part of just what we are. Whether it's the diligence in the way that she was maternal while at the same time being professional. She was an elected official for 20 years when I was growing up, but she also made dinner every night and we sat at a table and we were very, she was a steward of our family. And all of the values and the respect for our culture, you know, the tamaleras that she had on New Year's Eve where we would all get together, my grandmother, my aunts, and we'd make tamales, or her making menudo that we would have, you know, on Christmas Eve night. All of those things that I never realized were part of my being Hispanic or Latina. They were just part of me being Maricela, you know, the part of this family. That's how I came to become what I am, which includes a lot of my Hispanic heritage. We have a unique family. Our family goes back over 8 generations in Texas. So we are from the founding of Texas, and that Hispanic origin coming from when the state was essentially Mexico. I think because the roots are so strong, it's always been something that we are without even thinking about it. But unique in my mom was her ability to instill pride in who we are. It's what establishes me and makes me proud that my children, they practice all of our culture, our language, our foods, our unique qualities that are part of being Hispanic. And so I think I am very blessed to have been raised by strong women who instilled those cultures and that pride of culture in me, and that I carry with me, whether it's in my personal life or in my professional life.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I do agree with you, and don't think it's cliche. Moms play a very impactful part of our life, and clearly your mother has been very impactful in yours. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Jesus, how about you?
You know, I agree with Maricela. I think this is a difficult question, but for me, being Latino is something that I carry in my blood. You know, my family has a significant influence on my definition as a Latino. But one of the experience that opened my eyes is coming to the United States. Because when I was in my country, Mexico, I never realized I was a Latino because I was one with the minority there. So when they say, oh, Latinos, Hispanos, but coming to the United States really opened my eyes, and I realized that I was part of the Latino community, I was part of the Hispanic community, and that made me very proud, you know, because each time that you go to to get a driver license, they will ask you for your race. And when I see that paper, I would say, you know, you can see Latino, Black, white. And I was like, well, I think I'm a Latino. I will check the box Latino. And I'm very proud. I'm very proud to be part of this community. And like Marisela said, you know, your identity as a Latino, you know, the food, your culture, your country is something that I'm very proud.
Absolutely.
And a very beautiful culture it is. Well, again, likewise, thank you, Jesus. And as you share those answers to the original question, I hear you speak a lot about your foundation, about your roots. Fast forwarding to today, tell me a bit about your career journey, your career path, and why it is that you do what you do.
Jesus, why don't you take that one first?
Okay, I will take this one first. You know, working in this industry as a medical interpreter is so important because, you know, language is something that human beings use to communicate all the time. We use the language to communicate, and working in this part of the health industry that is the medical interpreter is something that I'm very passionate about. Speaking both language and helping our Latino community to have the communication between the providers and the patient is something that I'm very glad. You know, I do this because I think language opens doors. And if you don't speak the language, it will be very difficult to open doors. And I'm very proud to help people open doors. And on healthcare, you know, something so important about you know, your health, and be able to communicate that to the doctor and be able to understanding your needs. Because when I started working on the health industry, I was a CNA, nurse assistant, and I see the lack of interpretation. I see the need of medical interpreters in the hospital. And every time, you know, the doctors, nurses, they know that I was bilingual, they will say, Jesus, come and help me. And I'm like, okay. And I will interpret for the family members. I will interpret for the patients. I didn't know that I had to be certified. I was doing whatever the provider was telling me. Tell this to the patient, tell this to the family. But I was curious about it. So I started doing some research, and I find a medical interpreter course. And I talked to my manager, say, you know what, I find this course, you think I can take it? And she's like, yes, of course, you can do it on your own. And I drive an hour from Santa Fe, and I take the course. 8 months later, so I bring my diploma to my manager and say, okay, now I'm a medical interpreter, and I can legally interpret for our patient. And she's like, okay, Jesus, you're ambitious. And I'm like, yes. So I started interpreting for their patients. Finally, I was not happy. I was like, no, this is not enough. This is not enough. I need something else. So as when I start knocking doors, and I find this position, Language Access Services Coordinator, and I apply for it. And I get the position, and I'm so glad to be here and be part of this industry who help our Latino community.
Excellent. That work is so important that you do. Thank you very much for that.
Absolutely. So interesting, Jesus, you know, you and I do things completely different. I'm a professional in the law. I'm now a judge, but I practice law. I've been a lawyer 20 years. But it's interesting because you told your story, and I thought we actually have something in common when it comes to language. And so I'll tell, without going into too much detail, kind of how I've gotten where I am. So when I graduated from law school, I worked at a big international law firm. You know, that's kind of what you do. You know, you go as big as you can in a huge, sophisticated law firm. And at about year 8, I left and I started my own practice by myself. And I devoted my legal practice to representing undocumented individuals in disputes against companies and employers for workplace harassment, workplace mistreatment, and failure to pay, particularly that final category. And when you talked about the language barrier, so I got into this area by total chance. because I am bilingual, and I'm an employment lawyer by trade. And so people would send me cases because I could speak Spanish and I knew the law. And I got into this area where people were simply not being paid according to the law, like grossly abused. But because I was able to communicate with them in Spanish, they opened up to me. And they, for the first time, saw the system could support them, kind of like you saw in the healthcare system. Here, the legal system was now made available to them because here's a lawyer, a professional, who spoke their language. And it opened up this opportunity for me, and some of my greatest trials and victories, not necessarily in the amount of money, but in the self-satisfaction I received in the practice of law before becoming a judge, were in those cases when I was able to give a voice to someone in our community who didn't speak the language, but deserved to have all of their rights protected just like everyone else. People come to the healthcare system, they deserve the same kind of treatment, the same kind of care and thoughtful communication with the physicians and nurses. They just don't speak the language. And so it was interesting when you told that story, I thought, my goodness, I had a similar experience, but it was in the area of law. And of course I did that for quite some time. And for about the past 4 years, I've now been a judge. Interesting story that I just dawned on me while you were talking. So yesterday I'm in a hearing, which we're conducting in this way over video conference, because we're trying to keep people out of the courthouse for safety reasons. And I'm in this hearing, and this one particular gentleman, he's representing himself in a case where he was a defendant. He didn't show up for trial. And so he gets on Zoom, and I call and I said, Mr. Peralta, are you representing yourself? And he looked at me, and I thought, okay, let's go off the record. And I went straight to Spanish, and I said, do you speak English? No. Are you representing yourself? Yes. Are you asking the court for a new trial? Yes. We went through it, and I was able to give him the relief he wanted, speaking his language. And I think he looked at me like, what just happened? And just that ability to communicate, to say the system, whether it's healthcare, legal, whatever it may be, it's here to protect you too. Sometimes we just have to find a language that we both share. So anyway, I kind of got tickled by your story, because I realized we have something in common. We didn't know that, Jesus.
Yes, Marisela, and you can tell, when you start speaking Spanish to the family, to the
yes,
and their eyes open, like.
Well, it's something as similar as sharing food with someone. You share language. You share. It's the recognition that you matter. So I love how committed CHRISTUS is to ensuring all those that we serve in all of the different areas of the United States in particular, that we have the resources so that we can talk to them in their most comfortable language. In those trying times, whether it's being by the bedside of a family member who's getting healthcare services, or you yourself are. So I commend you, Jesus, for what you're doing. I'm glad you found that interest in the certification. We need more people to do that.
Thank you.
Outstanding. I love the energy and the passion around that question. Thank you both. I can tell that was very personal to you, and thank you on behalf of CHRISTUS for sharing your passion with us and helping our patients. Next question that I have for you is looking at current events. So there's been a lot of unrest around racial injustice lately, and most of that has been geared towards specific instances that have happened in the African American community. But from your vantage point, how does that impact, or to what degree is that impacting you and the Hispanic or Latinx community?
So I think that, as a person in this community, I am very heartbroken to see the discord in our society right now. I think that it is unfortunate that there is so much of a spotlight on so much negativity when there are so many good people in this country who do deeply care for each other. The majority of the people that I know respect each other and our cultures and our differences. We embrace differences. And it's very sad right now to see in our country such a negativity towards each other. Whether it's the Hispanic community, the African American community, the Asian community, the Muslim community, we could the list goes on and on. It's frequently said, we're a soup pot. in this country. We put all of it in, and that's what makes us flourish with so much depth of culture. And I think that's what makes our community so strong. It's what distinguishes us, that makes us so unique. And so I'm personally saddened. You know, I have young children, and I'm sad for them to see our country go through this growing pain of grief and negativity. I feel for all of the communities. I don't think it's only impacting one, because when we see injustice occur in one particular matter, whether it's an African American male or a Hispanic male, it hurts all of us because we are all a community. And so I am very heartbroken. I am also optimistic. I know we are a strong people. And I think that if we remain committed to the positivity of our communities, if we remain focused on making it better, we're going to get through this time, and it's going to be a black eye on our history. But perhaps it's something that we just need to know exists, and teach our children and communicate to our neighbors that we are better than this. We will not allow the negativity of some to overtake the beauty of the majority of us. So it is a sad time, Mike, for sure.
Thank you for that excellent perspective. Jesus?
I think we are part of the injustice. While our stories can be different, but we share something. We share the same injustice, and we share the same dreams for our future. You know, the Latino community is not strange about this injustice. We know in firsthand about injustice. A lot of Latinos, a lot of Hispanos has been died in the police hands. And we share this with our African American community. And just to let you know, we are here together on this. We are here together, and we are here to fight and join forces to fight against racial injustice and make a difference for our future generations. Make permanent changes in how we treat our minorities and how we separate our states, how we separate our communities. We are in this together. And I think right now we can see an awakening in our Hispanic community, in our African American community. They're waking up and they say, no more. And more than feed on this, we are together in this. I think each individual in the United States deserve the same rights and the same opportunities.
Absolutely. That togetherness is so important, especially as we find ourselves in many ways divided as a country. So thank you for that. For our viewer audience, that concludes the first half of our session today, but we will be back shortly to hear more from our esteemed colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.